Like father,
like son.
just two regular guys that love to distro hop.
Not too technical or even bleeding edge.
But functional and necessary for getting things done.
In Linux and open source.
Join us as we learn together on the Father
and Son podcast.
Welcome to episode 1 of season 2 of the Like Father, Like Son Linux Review podcast. I am Like Father.
And I am Like Son.
We said we wanted to get one up earlier or towards the end of the year, and things kind of happened where we couldn't. We had it ready to go, but we couldn't get it recorded before the end of the year. So this is going to be our first one of the year. We decided to go ahead and switch it over to season 2 and get started on this year. And so this episode, we're going to be talking about a few myths and misunderstandings about Linux and trying to ease people's thoughts on just how hard Linux is or is not. So let's go ahead and get started. What have you been done recently in Linux or open source or just general IT, Jamie?
Oh, tons. But in particular, I had a browser. It's called Vivaldi, and it's a Chromium-based browser. Which means if you've used Google Chrome, it's similar, okay, on its code part. Anyhow, it offers quite a few features. It's got a sidebar, and it also is able to pull up your mail. And I'm not just talking about go to the website, Outlook.com and get your mail that way. No, I'm talking about like you have Outlook installed on your device, and you're getting your mail through your
you don't really have
desktop.
You're actually pulling in Outlook because you're putting it as your mail server.
Correct.
That way. Yeah. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I use Proton Mail, and they have a specific, tool that you need to use in order to, get your mail because it's, all encrypted, which is great. So they have this program called Proton Mail Bridge, and they, give you the configurations, the IP address, the port that you're using, the secret code,
and the encryption code. Yeah,
yeah.
So basically it changes your password to this 4,000 digits with all kinds of characters in it.
Right.
And you, of course, have your regular username, but then it has a certain port that's coming through as well.
Correct.
And then you go ahead and usually what you do is you set that mail bridge to join up at the startup. So you have to do it in your auto start, and it loads up the beginning. And then when you open up Thunderbird or I don't know, some of the other ones that you want to use, you go ahead and use that and load in all the information as that's your mail server.
Yep. So Vivaldi isn't technically supported, and you input all the information. It should work, you would think.
Yeah.
Except it didn't. So I tried switching the protocols. There's a STAR, TTLS, and SSL, or TLS. These are all protocols for mail. It's some acronyms that I don't even know the name of. But how they send and receive, the amount of security on them is what differentiates them.
Correct, yeah.
So I changed it to the ones that Vivaldi supports. Still didn't work. So I went online. It's like, I know that somebody somewhere has got this working. I found a forum, and I think it was on the Vivaldi forums, and they had go ahead and export from Proton Mail Bridge the certificates. And I was like, okay, so exported those. And then you got to go into Vivaldi and open the certificates there. And once it's loaded in, all my mail started coming in.
Right.
And it was like, yes.
So it worked. And the mail goes out too just fine?
Yeah,
the outgoing
works
server
perfectly.
And incoming server. So, the nice thing about it is Vivaldi's just a real robust browser. It's got all kinds of functions it can do. You can do tabs, and you can do tabs if you want across the top or across the bottom.
Side.
Or you can actually set up, I don't know how you'd call it. Basically you can put tabs inside of one tab, if you will, or tabs inside of a folder, and you can have multiple ones. So like if I have this subject matter going on, you click on that and it'll open up the 3 or 4 tabs you have there for that folder. And then you have another folder, however you want to talk about it, but it's like multiple sub tabs inside the tabs. I don't know exactly. They probably have an official name for it.
Right.
But if you like simplicity, it's not yours. If you like to do everything in the browsing and then some, and yeah, it's yours. In fact, you can even do markdown notes in it and stuff like that as well. It's pretty cool.
I'm going to change that, though. If you do like simplicity, when you first open it, it has options to keep it very simplistic or full featured.
Or very complexly.
But what I love about this is that I peruse my browser far more than I ever open up Thunderbird. And so I'm consistently missing emails that I could possibly go and see. But now that I have Vivaldi open up, I can see a little corner tab that says, oh, you got 5 mails or 5 new emails. Click on it. It's like, oh, yeah, I don't need to read those or whatever.
Mine's more like, 500 emails.
Oh, man. I got rid of a lot of junk and unsubscribed from a lot of things that I didn't need anymore. So
yeah,
I don't get as many emails. I get maybe 10 a day at most.
And it's good to go through and, if you're not really reading those emails, I have to remind myself at least once or twice a year to unsubscribe to certain things. I mean, sometimes you get subscribed to stuff you weren't mean to subscribe to. You just, you had to use your email, so they'll send you that
right
first thing, what you're kind of interested in. You're going to read that, hey, everything like that. But then it's like, well, when you put your email in there, they're actually now going to send you all kinds of stuff that they're trying to sell or advertisement. And I get it. That's part of making money or getting your product out there.
Correct.
But, I wish they'd tell you that. Oh, by the way, if you put your email here, we're going to send you all kinds of stuff. At least 1 email a day, 3 emails a week, 26 extra subjects, and you can adjust your email preferences.
Right.
Which is usually unsubscribe.
Yeah, and if you don't know how to unsubscribe, you can look at the very bottom of most of the emails and very small text is a clickable link that says unsubscribe. The other option is to sign into that website that you created an account with,
right,
and go into the settings and then the notifications.
But then you got to remember your email or password and all that stuff, and maybe you can't remember that to start with. Anyway, and
the other option is junk mail.
Yeah,
put it in junk mail. You can
email. There are some email things that have filters in it. I want to say Google's kind of good at that when you get right down to it. I mean, if you have a Gmail account, you can put all kinds of filters in that to help you get through the junk mail and get rid of the junk mail as well. So Vivaldi, huh? Vivaldi.
Yep.
And we'll put a link in the bottom notes as well. What I did is I bought an EliteDesk from eBay. And the deal is these HP EliteDesks have AMD Ryzen chips in them. Ooh. And I don't know if it was a big thing out there at one time and then they had a overabundance of them. Maybe it was big during COVID and kept going on as people were working from home. But these EliteDesks are, for the most part, very small. They're almost like your mini PCs, if you will.
Right.
But the thing is, you can get them on Amazon for probably, about $109, $110. And they'll have like the Ryzen 5 chip in there, which is pretty good. And they're small. Or you can go on to eBay and probably get them for, $70 or $80.
Right.
I went ahead and went out there and looked, and I found a Ryzen 7 Pro 2700, and it had a 1 terabyte solid state drive as well already, and 16 gigabytes on the memory, which is good because I don't think you can change the memory. You can change the SSD, but I don't think you change the memory or add memory to it because it's solid into the motherboard. But it does have the Ryzen chip in there, and it's cheap. So this one I got for about $145, and this it also, since it was the Pro version, it actually has like a graphics card in there. So it has a small graphics card. I think it's AMD Radeon R7.
Intel based now, huh?
Yeah, well, it's AMD Radeon. So,
right.
But it kind of, the interesting thing there was that it's a small one. So you're not going to be able to do a solid bunch of great gaming on it, but you can do some video editing and things like that. And it will help, having this dedicated with its own set of memory chips and stuff like that. But I really do like it. And so I went ahead and set it up to record with for these podcasts. So if it's not working, you're not going to see this. But it is working for our little podcast. Then it worked, and hey, it was successful. I mean, the only thing I really did to it was I cleaned it up. It did have some, it was used. it did have a mess on the motherboard and stuff like that. And then I went ahead and installed a wireless card in there,
Right.
which just barely gave me enough cord to get to the antennas that stick on the outside of the little box of this thing. So it's very compact. And, you know, you open this and you unclip that and you pull this over and you bring this across. And if you ever get one of these things, you'll see how really compact they are. But it really is working. It's a great little unit. If you want to pick one up on eBay, you know, you can get one of these small ones. You don't have to have the fancy graphics in it, but you can go ahead and pick that up, let's say for $80, get you a monitor or a used monitor, which I've seen anywhere from $25 on up.
Right.
Mouse and keyboard. And if you want to experiment with some type of Linux operating system, you can on this little bitty computer.
Correct.
And you don't have to like mess with your laptop if it's your, you know, main horse,
right.
the one you're working with at that time.
Oh man.
Or your desktop. And you can go ahead and start trying out some of these Linuxes. That'd be kind of a cool intro to Linux that's on one of these little bitty units.
True.
Yeah.
It's not like we've ever broke our workhorse at one point or another.
I try not to do that. But
well, yeah,
I'm sure I have. And then I quickly try to get everything loaded back on it, you know.
Oh yeah.
So.
I do the same. And that's why I like to have that home drive as opposed to a home folder.
Yeah. In my case, I have my, you know, Nextcloud, and that's where I usually do my documents back and forth. And then I sync them on each one of my units that I have. And that works out really good. I like the Nextcloud, but that means you have to set up your own server or go out and buy a space for your server, which is pretty nice too, because they're really not that expensive. But I kind of like the idea of having it inside my walls of my home. And
he's not a Linux purist or anything.
Not as bad as some of them are, you know. I probably wouldn't ever have it where I was syncing onto different units and stuff like that. It'd be all encrypted and everything like that, and 40,000 different passwords. And there's a lot of things you can do, but mine's pretty simple. And I really don't have anything in there that, you know, would be really bad for anybody to take off with or anything like that. You know, I might have some sermons on there or something like that. So if they want to read the sermon, let's start with do not steal. But anyway.
You should have a sermon labeled, "Please do not steal this," or passwords, and name it passwords.
I left my window open on my car and someone stole my Bible. Well, I hope he reads it. Anyway. No, I mean, I do have it. You know, I do have some security stuff on it, obviously, but it's kind of, you know, it was interesting to, you know, I always wanted to try it to start with, and Nextcloud is a nice product and it's open source as well to do this. And it has a lot of neat features, and I don't use all the features, but like you can have a business that you're doing and you can use that as your office suites or your, you know, your
messaging client, your calendar, there are so many things. And then it's extendable or expandable, with extensions or other, plugins.
Sorry about that.
You're good. Other plugins that you can use to expand it even further. Yeah,
and you could do things, you know, it has like deck on it and I think it's Canet or Cabernet or something like that. Anyway, different features you can use, which are called other things in other type office stuff. But you can use it for many different things if you're using it in your business, you know, or you can use it, you know, of course, at home as well. But
I mean, even having a off the server calendar that's on your phone or even on your laptop is nice too, occasionally.
We use it for our notes for the podcast.
Yeah, I was about to say that, but you got me.
Yeah, and you share it and stuff. And you could use calendar. You can set up your email on it and use it as your email as well. It's not an email server because you'd be using, like, let's say in this case, Proton. I don't know if Proton would work on it or not, but with the encryption and the bridge and stuff, but I haven't really tried.
I think it's its own. I don't know. I've never tried it either.
You had to have like an outgoing server on there.
Right.
So
like a relay or something.
Yeah. So anyway, we have some apps we want to talk about, you know, some open source apps that we like to use. So mine in this case is VLC. So VLC is a media player. It's VLC is short for VLC media player.
Oh man.
It's really like Video Land Project or something like that. They use it, but it's free. It's open source. It's really versatile. Um, it's widely known for its ability to play almost any audio or video format without requiring additional codecs.
Right.
It gets you all the codecs you usually need when you first install it. I also like it because it works on all the platforms, whether you're on Windows or Mac OS or Linux or Android. It works on all of those.
And the UI is the same.
Yeah. And I also like the ability to convert. So I can convert one video format to another video format, or I can convert from video format to an audio format. Like sometimes we'll go in here and edit the audio to make it better on, like, say, Audacity or something like that. Well, I go ahead and convert it from the video to the MP3, and then I can load it up in Audacity and, do a few tweaking on it, if you will.
Right.
And then I can put it back in on the video. But I usually do that converting on VLC. Now, I know there's other devices and stuff, but usually if you're having troubles playing some type of media or anything like that, try VLC and you could probably be able to play it. So, it does MP4, AVI, MKV, MP3, FLAC, and many more. It's not that big. It's a very small type of app. It doesn't take up a lot of space. It's got some customizable skins, which I don't think I ever used. You can use it for streaming audio and video over networks as well. And again, it's free and open source. So it's usually my go-to player. That's one of the things I'm going to load up as soon as I load a new Linux.
Right.
Even if we're loading up one that we're going to be trying out, I'm going to load up VLC on there. So it's a beautiful program and it's open source. So, again, we always say, hey, if you can, give money to these projects, to help buy a cup of coffee or something for these guys. Mm-hmm. But they really did a very good job with VLC as far as, covering a gambit of media, type files.
Absolutely. And the program I was going to talk about, we've already talked about, is Vivaldi.
Yeah. So
it's a wonderful browser. I mean, I really love it. It's very feature packed.
Yeah, feature packed, and
it has an inbuilt.
I don't know. I think it uses all the resources. It just eats up all your memory and all your CPU. I mean, it goes up to 100% being used. You start buffering, but no, it really doesn't do that. It's not that bad at all. But
I've seen Edge do worse, but nothing bad about Edge either.
But yeah, Vivaldi. It's almost like, even if you're not going to use it as a browser, it's kind of fun to go in it and just play with it and see what it can do.
Yes.
Because it just got so many features, so.
You can even open up images in it and other things like that. It's pretty cool.
It's really neat.
It has an inbuilt ad blocker too.
A bit. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I like ad blockers, and of course there's certain web browser stuff that you have that will force you to open your pop-ups up or whatever, but yeah, it's nice to have a few of those things blocked. I like to use Brave a lot because Brave has a lot of blockers in it. Brave and Mozilla Firefox are going to be my two that I use all the time. And, if there's certain programs out there, I don't know, do you call them a program? Or you probably call it like a web app maybe or something like that.
Yeah.
But there's some that will only work on a Chrome-based one. And that just drives me nuts, It's like, why do they do this?
Well, I mean, then I believe Brave is a Chrome-based browser.
Brave is, but like if you're in Firefox or something like that,
right?
And I can't remember if Vivaldi. I think Vivaldi is a Chrome-based one.
Yep.
So there's certain ones that's like, hey, if it's not working in your Firefox, then you can go ahead and move over to Brave or Chromium or Vivaldi, and it'll probably work because they set it up as some type of Chrome-based web app, if you will.
Absolutely. And one bit of clarity that before I forget, codecs are just the way the operating system or software is going to read an audio file.
Yeah, it's the translator.
Translator would work. So let's go ahead and get into the myths and misunderstandings that we've kind of come up with. And one of them is Linux is only for coders and programmers, or AKA the power user.
Yeah, so when we were first using Linux back in, anyway,
the 1970s.
Yeah, I mean, usually the only people that are using it, I mean, I never even heard of Linux before. Our IT guys are coming up to us and say, well, yeah, we got this Linux stuff, You mean something different than Windows or Mac?
Right.
It's like, Yeah, it's free, and of course there are some good power users of theirs, but the main thing it was doing is they're using it for servers at that time, so they had to
Correct.
know how to use it. But when you think about servers, that's going to be mostly without the graphics. It's going to be
Correct.
all command line, and of course that was way above my head back then.
I was
So
about to say,
so
now
yeah,
you could probably get to a graphics user interface without it starting that way.
right. But now that was the old.
Correct.
Now these things are really robust. They got all the graphics in them. They even got graphic installers when you're installing it.
Package managers, even.
Package managers, so like Discover and some of these other ones, of course, Flatpak and things that we use. So you can find all these different apps there as well, but they're all usually for graphical interfaces and operating systems. If you started on Linux to start with, you wouldn't think anything of it.
Right.
You just know that you go here and grab this and get this panel and this window and this menu and this widget and these icons and I think most of it's to do with we're used to either a Mac. We grew up, that's what your family was using, or you
Hmm.
grew up using your Windows, or or you're used to using your phone or your tablet and whatever things on there.
Right.
But it's what you get used to using. Linux is not for just coders or programmers. I'm
Absolutely
not a
not.
programmer. I'm not really a coder. I'm a tinker. I like to tinker with things, so maybe that's my thing. I mean, Jamie's more of a coder or a developer sometimes, mostly programming and things like that. I don't usually use that. Yes, I have done a few little scripts here just to do one little
Right.
function on my computer at that time, and I don't even know if I have a script that I use anymore. This was back when I was taking, when I didn't have Nextcloud, and I was trying to
Yeah,
bring
you're doing
my
backups
backups or my Google Docs, the folders there, trying to
using
make that
rsync.
work. And so I was using some type of rsync or I can't remember exactly what it was called, but I did this little script that would auto start at the beginning
Hmm.
each time I opened the computer and did that. So I'm not that type of person. So the graphical interface is pretty cool, and I like using that. And if you get more and more you use it, the more and more you get used to it. But really, it's not for the power users at all.
No.
People can load it and use it knowing very little about what's going on in the background of Linux.
Absolutely. So moving on from that, being that it's for the power user, another common misconception is that Linux has a huge learning curve. But like my dad was just saying, the more that you use it, with anything, the easier it becomes. Some of these distributions might have a larger learning curve than others. Linux Mint, if you are a Windows user, Linux Mint is going to have a smaller learning curve than it's going to if you were trying to learn Arch.
Right, especially if you want to use like a Mate desktop
Right.
or a Cinnamon desktop or something like that.
Correct. And then on top of that, adding in the, what he was just mentioning, the desktop environment is going to be a big decision on how well or how small that curve can be as well.
Ubuntu is another easy one to learn and to
True.
use. It took probably like a Debian based, and they made it into their own and made it a little bit easier. The menu's a certain way. It makes it easier to click and know and move around.
Yep.
Manjaro's another one like that. Although Manjaro is built on an Arch distro, which is harder if you start messing up, if you will. But the way it's set up in the graphical interface, if if you were just talking about doing word processing, browsers, email, it could be, you could be using that or Windows.
Yep.
Yeah.
Distribution, prior experiences are a good thing as well. People that come from obviously a IT background, it's going to be a little bit easier, maybe a smaller learning curve for them. And people that don't use it very frequently, it might be a huge, bigger learning curve. But that'd be almost the same if you were going from a Windows to a Mac or a Mac to a Windows. It's about how much you use it. My son, I just gave him Solus on his device, and he is able to, and I didn't even show him, restart the computer I never told him how to get it. I never clicked it in front of him, and he's not doing it from the power button. He found the button in the top right corner. He clicks on it.
Shut down or restart type thing.
And clicks on restart. And I found that out today. I was like, I never showed him that, but he figured it out. So somebody who tinkers, that you could find out just about everything at some point in the Linux system.
And he's used to using Windows or even the little tablet, right? And the tablet is what, like a Samsung, or is it like a Fire?
No,
Android,
it's a on tablet.
Okay. So, even just with that experience of what he's using, he can figure out on Linux what's going on. And really, that's everybody. It's just people report successful transition to the Linux after a few weeks. I mean, a lot of these IT guys, if you will, or people that use Linux will turn around and, their grandma or their mom has this computer that's going really slow, and they set it and put Linux on there and just show them a few keystrokes and how to use certain things. And most of these people go on without a hitch.
Yeah.
And it's actually a little bit faster than what it was with the Windows or the Mac or whatever. And the security is a little bit higher too, because you can keep up with a more modern upgrade, if you will,
Correct.
Instead of the ones that aren't being used anymore, or not being updated, or not being, what's the word I'm looking for? Not being supported anymore.
Right.
So you can keep up the security that you have in your computers. And, there's some harder things like you said, Arch Linux or something like that. And of course, we wouldn't jump right out and use Gentoo right off, because that would be, suicide. Anyway,
it's not suicide, but it is a much higher learning curve, because back in the day when Dad was starting to use Linux, it was a lot of, you have to compile. And what that means is that you're taking the source code, the part that makes the
you still
computer.
have to compile on Gentoo.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just saying. You have to compile it in order for it to install. And then you have to take that compilation file and put them in the right spot so that you have access to them.
Right.
And so it is.
That one has a little bit more of a learning curve.
Right. It is quite a bit. So speaking of learning curves and speaking of helping others, one that is something else that would help lower your learning curve is community support. If you have no problem going into a forum or even maybe a chat room like Discord, then you can, with active communities, they're going to help you. And I swear, every time I have gone onto a Linux forum to ask about this, that, or the other, I usually get an answer within the day, if not within 6 hours, which is impressive if you think about it. They're always helpful. Usually if you're a first time user, you're not going to know that, hey, you need to run this command so that we have a little more information on it, but they usually will guide you. They're like, okay, I need you to run this command in your terminal. And if you're like, I don't know where terminal is, they'll tell you, all right, you're going to click over here in the bottom left and you're going to type in TERMIL, and pull it up, and then you're going to type this in, hit enter, and he's like, okay, well, I did that. How do I copy it? Okay, you're going to click and drag all the way up through the output. You're going to right click, and then you're going to do copy paste, so on and so forth. But yeah, no, community support within Linux is amazing. I love it. I can't stress that enough. Dad has actively communicated with a lot of other communities as well, and you're pretty thinking they're about the same, right?
Yeah, I don't usually I rarely ask questions, but sometimes I do. Mm-hmm. Most of the time I'm living out there and looking to see what's already been written out there, because by the time I'm getting to a distro and stuff like that, more than likely someone's already been through that problem and put it out there. I mean, Discord is one of the places that you can find different forums, if you will. Sometimes their websites has forums, or at least links to the forums.
Yep.
So there's a lot more information out there than I feel than like you see for Windows and maybe even for your Macs. But the community is out there to say, hey, this is what you need to do and to get it to work. So I really like the support you get from a lot of these different distros.
Absolutely. So, while Linux may present somewhat of an initial challenge, the learning curve isn't really as steep as you might think. As you get to use it, it's going to be easier with the right distro, the correct motivation, and access to community resources. Any user can overcome the initial hurdles and enjoy the benefits of a free and customizable operating system.
Yeah.
And moving on, another one would be Linux can't do gaming. Well, says the person who's gaming on Linux. No.
Yeah, I mean, that used to be pretty true. I mean, outside of having your Tux Racer.
Oh, yeah. Tuxmon.
Or what's the one where he's like going down on a snow, on a sled and stuff. So, yes, Linux used to be that way. But now, you have all your Wine and Proton. Valve, is making things where a lot of the things you can run on any other distro, Windows in this case, you can run on your Linux.
Right.
And mostly like through Steam. But there's, GOG and some of these other ones. And so there's other ones you can use, especially retro games. You could, I've been playing Dungeon Siege, Command and Conquer, Red Alert, Yuri's Revenge. Yes, I've been doing those. Those are fun. Those are on Steam too. And, there are some experimental ways that Steam can work with you on Linux. But even with that said, there's several that already have Steam support. And that comes from, your Steam Deck even, which is a handheld game you can play with Steam, and it's built on Arch. And since that's happened, all these games can be played. And there's people out there that will test them and say whether or not it can be played on Linux, or on the Steam Deck, rather. And they'll tell you what experimental thing you have to click as far as making it compatible with Linux.
They have a website called Wine HQ, and they have another one called Proton HQ that you can reference. And they do the same thing. They're like, okay, I've played this game. It was on this version of Wine or this version of Proton. This was the experience that I had. And, they might also say, okay, you need to run it in a window. Otherwise, it's going to bug out on you. But yeah, I mean, Linux has come far from what it used to be. And a lot of other gaming companies have also started to realize that Linux is a good source of users. So good profits. So sometimes they're making them directly for Linux instead of having to use Wine or something else of that nature.
I want to say even, Linux is even better operating system to use for gaming than Mac for sure.
Right.
Because Macs aren't really made for the gaming part. Windows are definitely for gaming. And I mean, you will get into some situations where they're using the anti-cheat stuff.
Mm-hmm. Destiny
2 or something like that, which, will not work on Linux right now because of the anti-cheat stuff. But most of the games will. Yep. I mean, my favorite one is Valheim. And, we use that. And that was actually built where it can play on Linux off.
Directly.
So there are games that are made to do on Linux as well. So,
yep.
And there's plenty out there to play now. So that's not, it's not a myth.
No, not at all. And I love it. And I think since Steam
Linux can be, games can be played on Linux now.
Yeah. And I think since Steam has really kind of jumped on that board, it's a lot of the gaming is coming more and more frequent in the Linux. Okay, another one.
It's more like a clarification. Linux is the operating system.
Yes. No.
Linux is actually the kernel, to get technical. So the kernel that they put together, and then all the operating systems will grab that kernel as its foundation, if you will, or its building block to start building Arch or, I don't know, Debian or
Ubuntu.
Yeah, I was going to say OpenSUSE, but Ubuntu's grabbing Debian, which is grabbing
right.
the Linux kernel. So, and then the kernels, they update, every once in a while, and it'll come out, and then they update the systems through that, off that kernel.
True.
Yeah.
Sometimes when a new kernel comes out, more hardware is supported, more security features. It's much like when you think about a Linux kernel update, it's a major update. If you've ever heard of firmware updating, it's about the same. You do not want to interrupt it in the middle of updating that.
Yeah, it'll crash it. It'll kill it.
Yep. So we have talked about this very frequently in most of the operating systems that we have tested up to this point, and that is that most of these have some form of software center.
Right.
And this goes into the next one where people are saying that finding apps in Linux is hard to find, or that there isn't any for what they're looking for.
Yeah. It's very limited.
Very limited, right?
Yeah.
So while you may not be able to use the proprietary software, and you certainly can try using Wine to run some of those if they only support Windows, like for instance, Photoshop, Microsoft Office,
all the Adobe stuff.
All the Adobe stuff. You can try to run it through Wine if you wanted to, but there are other alternatives that might be as good, if sometimes not better, than some of them, or maybe they have a different kind of learning curve too. You know,
right? And it's like whatever you start learning on. I mean, you know, I use things like Krita, and
what's that?
Yeah, Krita's going to be a graphics editing tool, and it's pretty powerful. And
Right.
Kidden Live is a video editing tool that's really powerful. And there's other photo editing tools. GIMP is a pretty powerful photo editing. And what's the other one? It was a GIMP that, you know, some of the animated movies were made out of. Blender's crazy sophisticated. And I don't know, there might be a learning curve on that one.
Right. But I mean, if you were in that field, it's right there.
Yeah.
And I'm certain you could learn it pretty quickly.
But I'm pretty sure I remember them doing some of the animated stuff that you've seen and gone to the theaters for, and they were running it on a GIMP or Linux or that type of machine. And so it's out there. It's not going to be, quote, Photoshop.
Right.
But you're going to be able to edit photos and edit videos and everything that we do. And so it's just a matter of learning that particular software compared to something else.
Right.
And they have thousands. They have thousands of apps. What about like Office? Do you have any Office stuff in Linux?
Oh, yes. Let me tell you about all of them. They've got LibreOffice. They've got OpenOffice. They got Apache. They got... I want to say Sheets, but that's not the right word I'm looking for.
They got FreeOffice.
FreeOffice is another one. Yep.
And
Kingsoft Office.
And that's not to mention things like Google Docs.
Right.
You know, for you guys
versions
that did Chromebook and stuff like that, and Google Docs have been around, Google Office has been around. What's a web-based? You can do that. Microsoft has the web-based version of their Office, which you can do Outlook and Word and Excel,
right,
and PowerPoint, and you could do all that in the web version. Just open up your browser and run it. I mean, you'll log in just like you did at work.
Right. And the LibreOffice is probably the one that I suggest most frequently, and it's because it comes with more than all the other ones. Like OpenOffice usually comes with Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. Well, LibreOffice comes with those, as well as PowerPoint and Math.
Impress, that's their version of that. I want to say Draw.
Yeah.
Draw is a pretty powerful thing. I've even put stuff in from Publisher into Draw. And I mean, some of the fonts are different and stuff like that, but something where I can actually look at and see
where it's going,
the idea of what they're doing, and pull graphics out that I need. It really has all kinds of Office apps that you can use. So that, and I mean, LibreOffice is powerful.
Oh yes,
for being an open source type program, and it's been around forever.
Absolutely, it's impressive. I love it. I've been using it for years, even at school. Occasionally, I do have to go and edit a thing or two because the versions didn't quite work out the way they were supposed to, especially with PowerPoints. I don't know what it is about PowerPoint, but that one always seems to, when you're converting it from one to another and running it on a Windows device, always seems to be off. It hasn't been off in a while.
And the other Office thing you'll be using is going to be email.
Right. So
you have Thunderbird, Evolution, Kmail, Contact, Geary. Yep. And then if you want to go out on a web,
you got Gmail, all those other ones.
Your Outlook and Gmail and everything else you use up there as well.
There's also, oh no, I'm thinking on an Android device. Sorry, never mind. Wrong podcast. Okay, so we were talking about the power user a little bit earlier. Let's go ahead and go into another common misconception that many people are thinking of, and that is you have to be an expert in command line. Unless you're running a server, you don't need to be proficient in command line in order to operate it, especially with the GUI or the software centers that they offer for you to begin with. You can and will probably learn here and there commands to start working in the terminal. You might become a little bit more used to it, a little less scared to use it. I know when people see that black and white text, it's always like, oh no.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in the office, at work and you're on your works device and you're seeing that come up, and then it's freak out mode.
I mean, you're going to have the same type things. You're going to have Dolphin or one of these other, file systems that you're going to be using. You're double clicking on that file system and open it up.
Just the same.
The part of that learning there is going to be, I'm used to going to C drive and then user and then documents to get to documents. And this thing, you're actually going to go to like home and your user and then documents, whatever your username is there. So yeah, it's just learning what those are. But once you learn that, then you know where everything's done. And it has a video folder and a documents folder and photos and music. And, it's just, just kind of like if you're going from between a Windows and over to a Mac OS, there's a learning curve there. And trying to figure out, okay, where does it store its files? How do I open this program? Which really brings us, because all the GUI based stuff is going to make it really good. And yes, if you learn some of the command line stuff, it does make things faster, easier, more powerful, if you will. But it's not where you have to know.
Correct.
And depending on, of course, which operating system you're using. So, if you want to do some scripting and automation and on and on and on, you can do stuff. But that's the same thing. Are you going to be doing that on your Windows unit?
Yeah.
If you don't, then you're probably not going to be doing that on your Linux unit. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yes, Windows has a command line area,
And you can run things and you can.
And so does Apple, or
do this thing.
Macs. So yeah, if you're not a power user in those areas, you're probably not going to become a power user in your Linux area as well, so.
Or at least not as much anyway.
Yeah. So it's again, you have online resources and documentation to learn all that stuff, people out there to help you. But for the most part, you're going to stay in some type of GUI-based package manager, some GUI-based desktop. And it's going, for the most part, you're going to get used to doing the same functions, browser, email, some type of office that you're using, and you're just going to be using it on a different operating system. So what about the myth Linux cannot get viruses?
It's absolutely true. I'm kidding. I have to say it is a common misconception that Linux cannot get viruses, just like Mac can't get viruses, or your Android or your iPhone. Everything out there that has some binary focus to it or man-made option to it can and may have a virus. Usually, Linux is a little bit more out of it for two reasons. One is generally you're having to install it yourself.
Yeah, the way you're installing it. It's not like an automatic type function.
Correct. And then the second thing is Linux, while it is gaining a lot more traction nowadays than it has been, is still a very small community and than, say, the Windows user or the Mac user. So if I was a person that wanted to create a virus or to create a keylogger or something of that nature, I would want to make sure in the shortest amount of time, how many people can I hit?
Whatever their sick mind is at that point, because, I can't believe people will do this just to say they did it or just for the fun of it. I don't know, but it's just crazy. Of course, I realize you have some of the ransomware people and stuff like that.
True.
But
something that I do find pretty entertaining about that, you're going and saying, what in their sick mind is why they would do that. Well, we also have people that are going and finding these loopholes on purpose to let companies know, hey, you have a problem that you need to fix here. And here's how I got there. So they can close those little holes. Those are usually called ethical hackers, or they're pen testing, penetration testing.
Kind of like those guys that are breaking into a bank or whatever to show the holes you have in your security system there.
Right.
So they hire them to see if they can break into whatever. And yeah. And I mean, basically Linux has security inherently because of its architecture, the way it's designed. So certain types of malware and things like that won't execute in Linux. So yes, that'll help. But there's still, you have to do your best practices, stick to trusted app stores or resources like FlatHub or Snap, maybe, the ones that are part of your, whatever it is, Zipper, if you're on OpenSUSE, or, some of the other ones. Use secure protocols for online transactions, don't be doing online transactions on a hotspot at the coffee shop, keep system software up to date. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Sometimes you're going to move from Windows to Linux just so you can keep an updated system on your computer, because some of these aren't being supported anymore. And that means the security stuff's not being supported anymore.
Like, for instance, when they let go of XP, and then they let go of Windows 7, and then Windows 8.
Right.
And now, at some point, they are going to drop the support of Windows 10 as well. So, and on top of that,
this year
some of those, some of those the newer operating systems aren't going to run on your old hardware because they just can't keep up with it. Linux, on the other hand, would probably still, even the modern Linux versions may still run on your old hardware.
Yeah, I mean, some of them, like, let's say Zorin, they actually have, this is for a more modern system, and this one is for a more, an older system. Some of them have more of a robust and a lot more, space being used, and basically a lot more of the system resources being used, and some of them are minimizing it so they're not using as much, so it'll still run fast on an older system. What about Linux is restrictive?
Okay, I don't know who on earth told you that Linux is restrictive, but Linux is the complete opposite.
Yeah.
Because of its open sourceness, if you can dream it and are good with the code, you can absolutely customize it to whatever you want it to be. That said, you don't have to be a coding expert to customize your Linux. I'm just giving you that you can go in and see everything.
Yeah, your desktops and colors and shapes and things like that. There's a lot of things that are pretty cool to customize. And that was one of the things that kind of drew people to Linux in the first place. The spinning cube, people switch between stuff like that,
From Compass,
cool, yes. Where is that, And but in fact, if we're honest, maybe one of the downfalls of Linux that makes it so ununderstood by everybody is to do with how overly flexible it is. There's so many things you can do in so many different ways that it almost makes it, complicated. Because it has so many choices.
Yeah.
Especially if you're one of those people that cannot decide. But really,
that's operating system were we on that had so many different features that we couldn't compile all of them?
Yeah.
I think vanilla was one of them.
Vanilla might be, but you also had like Garuda. You had like 4,000 things you can load right there at the beginning. You just click here, click this. I don't even know what that is. Let's click on that, and 30 minutes later after it gets done downloading everything, it's like, really, I didn't need all that stuff because I'm only going to use this one out of those 10
cool.
And this one. But yeah, there's some neat things there. But that community driven operating system, Linux, is really, with the kernel Linux, has so many different choices because there's so many different styles, so many different creative people out there. It really is not restricted. It's actually really open,
absolutely,
and creative and flexible. So, but there's so many alternative solutions that you can use. And like I said, again, if you don't have Microsoft, you may have LibreOffice. If you don't have GIMP, if you don't have Adobe Photoshop, you can be using GIMP. Sorry, flip that a little bit. Darktable for raw image processing and some of these other ones. Open source is customizable. It has a diverse range of distributions, making it highly flexible and adaptable for anybody. While some users may require specific software, the Linux community provides alternatives and workarounds to ensure that the user can achieve the goals they're looking for.
Absolutely.
So you have that end goal you're going for. Now, I will say if you're used to using only Adobe, you can only use Adobe, and you're only using Adobe at your work, you're probably going to get frustrated trying to use the Linux stuff to adapt to the Adobe stuff. You could probably do a lot of the similar things, but if you have to give it to a co-worker that's using Photoshop, then you probably have to stay with Adobe Photoshop, But when you get home, you can go ahead and load up, GIMP or something else and try it out. Because there's some things that you might be able to do that is a lot easier and doesn't have the learning curve that Adobe Photoshop did. Uh-huh. So what about Linux is only for servers?
Linux is not only for servers. That's
what we've been talking about for the last, year.
Oh yeah, Dad, you and I are just right here, right now. We're working on a server, right?
Yeah. I learned Linux desktop long before I started to learn how to put it on a server. And server was kind of scary, but because I learned Linux and a little bit of stuff to do a command line, not only was I able to do a server, but I was also able to do things at work as a server as well. So, which I'm not using Linux there, but I am using a Unix up there,
Right.
And, so we have different things that we use in our servers, but because I got used to using Linux, it was easier to use. I got used to using the Linux, and I saw that the Mac, had a familiar sense to it, so I wasn't lost when I went from Windows over to Mac and try it out for a little while because I used Linux. And, Linux, Mac was built on a Unix type thing before. So some of the file systems look really familiar. And the navigation is kind of familiar just because you used that before.
And the other thing is, because you and I jump from other distros and other desktop environments kind of frequently, we were not scared to learn a little bit more or kind of explore just to find out what it does. So whenever you get some new operating system, you're going to be like, hey, I can probably find where I need to go.
Yeah. And that's actually that's the fun of it. That's the thrill.
Oh, I love it.
That's why I like to do this. And that's why I distro hop so much. But let's be serious here. Let's talk about this. It's really a lot to do with navigation. If we had a person that lived in a box, and the only operating system they had was, let's say, Ubuntu, and they learned how to use Ubuntu, and their computer was Ubuntu, and every computer they used was Ubuntu, and their laptop was using Ubuntu. If they saw all of a sudden a Windows, they would be lost. They'd say, this is strange. This is stupid. Why do they do their file system this way? Why do I have to do this that way? Because it's what they're familiar with. Once you get into a Linux computer, just like when you got into that Windows computer for the first time, there's going to be a certain amount of learning you're going to have to do to get familiar with it. And a lot of it's going to be navigation. Right now, we're going to be talking about distro hopping, and we're going to be reviewing another distro. This distro happens to be using OpenBox as its desktop, it took me a while to get used to the navigation. How do I find this? Where's this located? I don't have any idea. I just want to turn it off. How do I turn it off? And these are simple things, but once I figured it out, it's easy. And then when I jump on one of my other distros, I'm like, oh, wait, no, right click doesn't do that. Sorry. So
love it.
The more you work with it, the more familiar you become with it. And remember, I had this conversation about, knowing where files are stored is going to be a huge thing. I don't know how many people I work with that when they go and store something, they can't find it again because they don't know where to store it. Well, Windows is going to be working usually the last place you stored on this particular program is where it's going to store the next time.
Right.
So if you open up a special folder to put that in, you made it, and it's going to be over there. Before it was in pictures, but why is it over in this file now? Because that's the last place you went.
Had it. Yep.
So knowing your navigation on your computer is going to save you a lot of time. So learn it, figure it out. Go backwards and forwards on it. And then once you start doing that, it's not going to be hard anymore.
No.
It's actually very easy. And then you start asking, well, why does this other system don't do it the same way? But navigation is the biggest part of our fear, our frustration. Spend some time with it, play with it. And then, one day it'll be like, oh, well, why doesn't everybody do it that way?
Yeah, that's another thing. It's like, there's a lot of things that I like about Linux that I don't like in Windows, like that they didn't have in Windows, or it seems like Windows a little bit behind the productivity curve.
Well, because they didn't have to change.
Right.
Linux has to change because that's the group that's working with it. They're constantly updating it, constantly changing stuff. Windows is like, okay, we sold our Windows 7 now. Now we'll start working on our Windows 8, which was, not very good. But,
Windows 8 was a great touch screen system.
It was new to them doing that. So, yeah, it's great when you start thinking about tablets or something like that. Hey, that works pretty good, or a phone. But, as far as their version of a desktop, it wasn't really.
No.
Yeah.
They should have never shipped it out on every device.
But, it did get better, if you will. But it's just, you got to get used to these things and work through it. And it gets easier, whether you're working on Windows or Linux or Mac OS or Android, or, it seems like we never had, our younger people, we don't have to say anything about Androids and how to navigate Androids, right? But you get to an older person that never used a phone that way. It's almost like it's a different language, a different, written in a different, world.
Right.
And it's frustrating to them because it's something they're not used to, and they don't want to spend the time to learn this new system of doing something. So spend some time with it, learn the new system, and you'll do really well. That brings us up to the verse of the week. So what's our verse of the week?
That's going to be Psalms 98:1. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. His right hand and his holy arm have worked salvation for him.
Yeah, so I just thought, this would be great for starting a new year. We're starting a new series of episodes here. And, it's just everything's new. The Lord is, sing to me a new song. Be creative. Whatever it is, kind of like we work with Linux, and we're always going to the newer Linux and see what that looks like and open it up. Don't be afraid to start something new. I love that thing about, it's a new day with God every day. And as long as we're following him and looking his way, he's going to make sure this relationship is always refreshed, always new to us. His love is, he's showing different things every day that's new if you open up your eyes and see it. So
I think Uguay said it quite well as well in Kung Fu Panda.
Yeah.
He's like, yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift.
It's a gift.
That's why it's called the present.
Yeah. So anyway, our next episode, we're going to be reviewing Archcraft Linux. So Archcraft Linux is a minimal flavor of Linux built on Arch with the open box desktop. It is really different.
It's taken me some time to get used to it too.
Yeah, but I really like it. It's been pretty, I got used to it, and I got it on my laptop as well as my desktop, and we'll be talking about that. Hopefully we'll get the episode out to you really quickly. It's been kind of hard to schedule everything, and I know, we got our scheduling is crazy right now. Jamie's going through school, working on a degree, plus he has work, plus he has family, and of course work for my church is always busy too, and well, it's just trying to schedule together so we can actually talk about this. And it seems like there's been one crazy thing after another, especially, with the flu going around and COVID, and everybody's been sick. And it's just like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? But hopefully we're over all that. We can start doing a little bit more consistent recording for you guys. And maybe we'll get some stuff out there to help you learn a little bit about Linux. Until then, remember, love God. Love your neighbor, keep your mind sharp, and also your computer with Linux and open source.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, guys. Bye.